So social gatherings of more than 6 people will be legally banned in England from today following a steep rise in coronavirus cases. The ban will apply to people meeting in private homes, indoors and outdoors, and places such as pubs and restaurants. There will be some exemptions, with the ban not applying to schools and workplaces. Anyone breaking the rules will be liable to a £100 fine, which would double with each offence. Well, to answer all your questions around the new rules, I'm joined by Prof Alan Maryon-Davis, Honorary Professor of Public Health at King's College London, and Dr Bharat Pankanya, an expert in communicable disease control and outbreak at the University of Exeter Medical School. Thank you both for joining us. Alan, perhaps I can start with you. This first one from Janet Lyle in Nottingham. Does it mean 6 at a time? So could it say 6 in the morning and a different set of 6 in the afternoon or the next day? Or say a family with several grandchildren visiting in relay?
Yes, it means 6 at a time. So yes, you could do this in bursts, if you like, morning, afternoon, evening. Yes, and you can ring the changes as much as you like, but it has to be a limit of 6 people. And
is that your understanding as well, is it, Doctor?
Yes, it is. And therein I'm nodding my head in disappointment, because automatically you are actually mingling with 18 people or 24 people, because you're having 6 in the morning, 6 at lunchtime, 6 in the evening, 6 in the late evening. And therein is the fault in our 6 gathering at one time.
Yeah, you use the word mingling, and that actually appears, I think, in the wording of these restrictions. I mean, what do you mean by mingling?
I mean that they are together. In other words, they're eating, drinking, chatting, sitting together, prolonged conversation over 15 minutes. In other words, they are one entity.
OK, I will move on to the next question, which is from Becky Anderson. Alan, if I could put this to you. I've just sent my 2 children to high school where there are 550 children not wearing masks, sitting next to one another and walking down corridors where they're not following the correct social distancing. How does this make sense, and how can any child be safe? And many people are asking that one.
Yes, it does. It doesn't particularly make sense. I mean, in the classroom, face coverings aren't necessary, because what the schools have done is to take precautions, and they have the students sitting at proper distances from each other. So that works well. The problem comes in the corridors and in the communal areas, and there the advice is certainly for those who are from year 7 upwards anyway, that they should wear face coverings, because in those situations they could be mingling quite closely, as we've heard, and they could be breathing all over each other. So that should be happening. It does, however, it is largely up to the discretion of the head teacher, and it does depend whereabouts in the country the schools are. But ideally, you would certainly have face coverings being worn in those communal areas, in those crowded corridors.
And Dr Pankanya, of course, hygiene crucial on this, and everyone knows it's quite difficult to persuade children to wash their hands at the best of times, but this is going to be crucial, isn't it?
This is very crucial, and also to just expand on what Professor Alan Maryon-Davis was saying, it's the advice at the school that is really important, and the advice has to be, look, keep your distance. This virus is out there, it is circulating, and therefore, please, 6 is not the top limit. Have it as few as possible and keep on washing your hands. In fact, timetable washing your hands. Every 2 hours, wash and dry your hands.
Right. Dr Alan Maryon-Davis, Professor, Angela Brown in Essex has asked this. My eldest daughter and son-in-law have 5 children ranging from ages 3 to 14. So they're a family of 7, and that's without any visitors. Does that mean that my husband and I are not allowed to visit them at all? I've been shielding since March, as I have incurable secondary breast cancer in the lung, and only see them and my other younger daughter, husband and grandson. And so is this classed as an exception, she asks?
No, not really. The way to get around that one is for that family to split up, as it were, and just to see, well, you and your husband will be allowed to see 4 of them at a time, and they can ring the changes as to which 4 that is. But if to stick strictly to the latest rule, it does seem awfully harsh, I have to say. It should really be a maximum of 6, even within that family, unless somebody is a single adult living alone, in which case they could be in a support bubble with a family, and that means it can expand. But broadly speaking, no, you've got to stick to that rule of 6, even in a situation like that, I'm afraid.
Dr. Pancania, I mean, awfully harsh is how the professor described it. Some would say that seems awfully silly because if you're splitting up the groups, you're still in contact with one another. It doesn't matter if you're all together or not.
I agree with you. Whilst I agree with Professor Alan Maryon-Davis, he was my teacher in the late 1990s, I say it is a bit silly. And the reason why I think it's silly is for the reasons we've already explained, which is, you're mingling in the first half hour with one group, and then in the second half hour, group number two. Of course, we have to keep to the 6, but it is silly. And what can you do? Those were the rules made by our government. What
you didn't see was Professor Alan Maryon-Davis's reaction when he heard that, and he's trying to work out now whether you're a good pupil or not. But we'll leave that. We'll move on because we're getting a lot of questions. This one from David Pennington, he says, do students living in halls of residence on the campus of an FE and HE college need to follow the rule of 6 when not in class and just socialising? If so, how should a college or university manage this? Professor, first of all.
Well, yes, they do. I mean, if they're in, say, the sort of student common room or something like that, or around the bar or whatever, that venue has to follow the usual advice for hospitality venues. Even though it's broadly speaking, it's in an educational setting, nevertheless, it is a hospitality venue, and therefore it has to follow that rule of 6. So you shouldn't have any more than 6 students gathering around a particular table, and the table should be socially distanced, and all those other precautions should be taken. And the venues usually are very good at this, and they do their risk assessments. They should also take note of who's there in case they need to do some contact tracing. So all that sort of stuff has to be done. But yes, that rule of 6 still applies in those off-classroom situations.
And Dr. Pancania, you're nodding.
I am, and actually what I want to add is those social gatherings pose a risk. And just because it is 6 does not mean you are at 0 risk. People need to be aware. And furthermore, I would urge all those settings, please switch your music off for the time being, because the louder the place, the greater the risk of you speaking in a loud voice, more droplets coming from you to your other people, and therefore a chance of getting infected. So you need to talk in lower voices and keep the noise down in such places here on in.
OK. Now, Mervyn Coates, we are foster carers with a home of 6. Can social workers, etc., still do home visits? Professor, what's the rule on that?
Yeah, that's straightforward enough, because people visiting the home for care purposes, health purposes, charitable purposes, etc. Those people are allowed to visit that home, however many there are in that particular household. So that's all right. And people who are coming to do work, and it might be somebody who is installing something or something, they are allowed to visit that household as well. So that's relatively straightforward, that one.
OK, well, let's move on. Dr. Pancania, this is from Colin Gorham. How will 6 people, all from different households, be able to socially distance meeting in a pub or restaurant? He says it's all still confusing.
It is difficult, and like the other questions that we've discussed, that you can circumvent the law if you so wish. And my health protection advice would be, look, this is for your own well-being, this is for you not to get infected and for you not to infect others. Keep your circulation low. Circulate with few people, as few as possible and as infrequently as is possible, because I know people are trying to do these combinations and permutations of what is allowed. It is much better to say, call it a day, we'll live for a better day in the next year. OK,
now Dolores Marsh has sent this question. Can persons in a lockdown area attend a wedding and reception that's not in a lockdown area? Professor?
Yes, yes, they can, because weddings and receptions have one of these exemptions where you're allowed up to 30 people in the wedding, and also in the reception too, as long as the venue or the church on the one hand, or whatever place of worship it is, and the reception, the hospitality, as long as they do a proper risk assessment and they allow and they use strict social distancing and all those other things, and there's the hand washing, the hands, face, space. As long as all that's respected, then yes, you can do that.
Dr. Pancania, I thought I saw you shaking your head.
Yeah, because this is akin to coming from a high-risk area. So whilst it is allowed, you are actually emigrating from a high-risk lockdown area to go to a non-lockdown area. Therefore, extra caution, extra precautions, absolutely important. And you might even want to say, look, before the wedding, check it out. Are you really fit to come to this wedding and not, in fact, the other guests?
Yeah, that's all very well, but as we know, and we're reporting today, getting a test is a problem.
Yes, big problem. And that's why I hesitated in saying you will go and get that test.
Yeah, Professor, on this issue of testing, did you think 6 months in we would still be having discussions about how easy it is to get a test?
No, I didn't. I think we've been behind the curve on the testing all the way through, really. It's been a game of catch-up the whole way through. Obviously, the numbers of people being tested has grown enormously, and it's putting great pressure on the laboratories, and we're having tests now being sent to other countries now to get their the results. So, no, I didn't anticipate that it would be as difficult as this. And when we have this big review of the whole thing one day, we'll have the big review. I'm sure that particular point will come out that we didn't get our testing organised anywhere near early enough.
And we were warned very early on by the World Health Organization. I remember the news conference. They said test, test and test.
They did indeed, that's right. And we were a bit slow to heed that warning, I'm afraid.
Dr. Pankania, this one from Kay Wright. Oh, this is close to my heart. Will organised gym classes be limited to 6 participants from today, like a spin class, for example?
Well, it is a group of 6, and that is allowed, but you need to be cautious because it is an indoor setting. And I would say if you're going to the gym, even though it is only 6 people, check it out. Make sure it has good ventilation, good flow of air, and not too many people coming and going, because indoor places, poor ventilation, risk of infection.
OK, Professor, staying with the fitness theme, this one from Michael. I play on a darts team, and our league was due to restart on the 28th of September, but I'm in doubt if we should go ahead because we have 6 players in our team and our opposing teams have the same. So would you please give clear direction if we are allowed to play matches under today's new 6-persons rule?
Well, I'm trying to put myself in that situation. I'm thinking that this is probably in a pub setting. Not necessarily. It might be a social club or something. But as long as each darts team sticks to its own table, and then they get up alternatively to throw their arrows, then that should be okay. Basically, the basic rules we've been talking about today is sit in your own 6. Don't huddle too closely together. Keep the music level down so that avoids you leaning in to hear what somebody's saying. But just, yes, keep separate, and that should be okay because you're only going up to the board one at a time and you're relatively separate. Well, good ventilation and all that. So all those things we've talked about.
Well, really, how far apart do the 2 sets of tables need to be? If you've got 2 teams of 6 and they're not supposed to get close to each other, I mean, how does that work?
Well, the tables have got to be at least 2 meters apart. That's the basic rule. And when they're sat in their group of 6, they've also got to be separated as much as they can reasonably be around their table. So and obviously trying not to face each other and try. It's going to be difficult. We have to use common sense in these situations. The rules are there, but a lot of common sense needs to be applied to this situation as well.
Yeah, follow the arrows. Sorry, forgive me. Cheap shot. Yeah, I know. Thank you. Dr. Pankania, this one from Janet Marjoram, who says, please can you clarify the new rules for places of worship? You, the BBC, state that the rule is 6 people per group only, but the Superintendent Minister of our Methodist Circuit says it does not apply to churches if social distancing measures have been put in place. We're having a meeting this week. There could be 10 people present. Absolute clarity is needed. Many of those attending will be over 70 years of age. And then, of course, that changes the sense of this because we are talking about something potentially fatal for particularly that age group.
My view would be avoid. You are in your 70s. The risk from a coronavirus infection for over 60-year-olds is significant. And I would say, whatever the rules, whatever the precautions, my view is now is not the time to be venturing out into a place where other people will also be gathering. No matter what precautions take, things happen. And I would want to be ultra precautious, especially in an indoor setting like a church.
Right. On a similar theme, Professor, we've got this from Catherine Mason in Gloucestershire. Does the new rule of 6 preclude amateur choir rehearsals of more than 6 at once? I think it does, but other choir committee members take a different view. There's some discord.
Yes, this is not clear really, and I know that the choir leaders are waiting further guidance on this. I think 6 is probably the limit. It's not a good idea because singing is particularly a dangerous situation because you're breathing out quite heavily, and there's a real risk of infecting others. But in terms of the rules, I'm not too clear on that yet. I would say we probably still need to stick to the 6 rule for now until we get further clarification.
Dr. Pankanya, I heard you say don't do it.
Yes,
yeah, look, there's clear evidence. There was a choir practice going on in the United States, and a significant number, I mean 90% I think, got infected and 2 died. Therefore, even if it is 6, even if it is allowed, choir practice in the middle of a coronavirus pandemic, don't do it.
Don't do it. Right, well, you couldn't be clearer. Now, one last question from Louise Hitchcock. Now, this one, I can't get my head around, but I'm going to give it to you. Professor, first of all, we went on holiday last week to stay in a cottage in Devon. 2 households mixing with a total of 8, including children. When we went on holiday, the rule had not come in, but now if we go and sit on the beach together, we could be fined, even though we're going back to the same accommodation after. At the start of our holiday, this was within the rules, so does that mean that we currently classed as one large household until we return home and are therefore exempt from the rule of 6 until we get home?
Oh, well, I can't get my head around that either. But good. I would say I think in that situation, let's assume that the rule of 6 is applying, and you basically got to stick to that simple number. Don't even on the beach. It's okay in the open air. It's much safer. We know that. But I would still advise those people to stick to their own 6 group of 6, and their friends stick to their own group of 6, and have at least 2 meters between the 2 of you. You can still chat to each other. There's a strong sea breeze. You may not be able to hear what each other's saying, but at least you're out there in the open air and you're communicating with each other. I would say that's probably the way to play.
But going back to what you were saying earlier, they could have 2 rugs and swap halfway through, 3 each from each.
Rug sharing, yes, I'm not sure about that. It's a good one.
Dr. Pankanya, I mean, this is where people get very confused by this.
Yes, and I would say, look, I would treat it as one unit because it's a lot easier, and otherwise we are symbolically distancing ourselves and being silly I if you are indoors and you are a group of 8, you are indoors, you are one family unit or one unit. So I stick to, I think I would call it one unit. But the important point here is we mustn't consider 6 equals safe, 7 equals unsafe. Even 6 can be unsafe if somebody in your group is infected and infectious.
Well, that's really good to sort that out, Dr. Bharat Pankanya and Professor Alan Maryon-Davis. I mean, where was he, your boss?
In Croydon. He was lovely. He really was, because this was with part two examination practice, and Professor Alan Maryon-Davis was a real gentleman. I'm so pleased to see him today.
We all are. And
That's very nice of you. Very nice.
Well, it's good to end on a positive note, and thank you both very much for helping out with your questions answered. Thank you.
Thank you.